Welcome to the football show on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Peter Martin, Alan Ruff, and from the Scottish Daily Mail, Stephen McGowan, here with us in the capital city, Madrid, getting ready for match day 6 of the Champions League. Real Madrid against Celtic. Might not have a lot, Stephen, for Celtic to play for, but it's still one of those great games that everybody's looking forward to.
You know, I think Celtic have been to places like Barcelona and Milan so many times, Peter, and I think they've wanted to come to the Bernabeu and Madrid for so many years. Not really the circumstances would have chosen, because obviously the Champions League is pretty much over. But it's still a cathedral of football. It's still something to savour. It's still a game to enjoy, even if I think the approach to the Champions League now is very much one of let's get this over with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking forward to it, Ruffy.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic setting. It's a very royal city. Let's be honest about it. If you look back over the history of Real Madrid as a club, it is backed by, at one point, a dictator. Now it's a multi-millionaire who is basically boasting a new stadium in the background that's almost finished, got a bit to go, but this is the absolute royalty of football as well. Super club.
Yeah, it certainly is, and most of the supporters that we've spoken to, it's a great thing to be here, young and old. You know, it's something that you'll remember for the rest of your life. I know a lot of the Celtic supporters have been to big games, but a lot of them haven't been here.
Yeah, listen, when you think back to the history of it, I mean, 14 European Cups is one thing. I think they're at 99 official domestic and European trophies, so they're looking for the big 100. They've celebrated so many times, and of course, most of the fans here have got just so many world-class players that they can look back on in their history.
Yeah, I think it must be quite a sense of entitlement, actually. You know, it must be quite hard to enjoy it after a while. But yeah, I think you touched on it with the word you used there. They're royalty, they're aristocracy. They're a completely different planet, and I think what makes it nice for Celtic and for Rangers and for supporters as well, just to be part of the conversation again. I mean, in the 70s and 80s that was quite commonplace, but I think in recent years, I think the relevance of Scottish clubs in Europe has dissipated and faded. It's felt like they've been back at the top table again this year. I suppose the big regret is that with clubs like this, can they compete? It's a moot point, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think the gap, and we're going to talk about Rangers shortly, and Giovanni Van Bronckhorst once again has been highlighting the gap between what they can do financially and compete with in the Champions League. It's a whole different level. But of course, as Stephen mentioned, not only royalty, there's a great kind of a romance about Scottish people looking at Real Madrid, because we go back to, Ruffy, you'll know all about this, I'm sorry to bring up your age, but you'll know about the 1960 European Cup final, Eintracht against Real Madrid.
Yeah, and everybody remembers that. I mean, I've always said to you, Real Madrid, if there's a European side, it's my side. And basically because, and I know it sounds silly, it's the all-white strip. I don't know what it is. It's that away back there in the 60s when they were strutting their stuff at Hampden, and they looked absolutely magnificent in that strip. And you know, the players that they've had from that day onwards have absolutely been tremendous.
Well, yeah, you waved a few white flags in your time, Ruffy, didn't you, really? So
well, fortunate enough, we booked into our hotel, and right away the boy behind the desk had noticed my name, and he went on to Google, and he was quite wised up for the time we got back to the hotel. But fortunately, I haven't got a Spanish player that's absolutely done me in a few times rather than Zico. So
did they remember you for that Brazil game in 1982? Maybe. Yeah, so that's a good.
Just open up the wounds.
Oh,
Stephen.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I totally get that. Glaswegians look at Hampden Park, an unbelievable crowd, and you're talking about Gento, Alfredo Di Stefano, Puskas. It was an unbelievable side playing football just from another planet at that time, and so many people, Sir Alex Ferguson, Jock Stein, they all waxed lyrical about that great side who'd gone on to win it, I think 5, maybe 6 times.
I remember, I think it was 1964 when Jock Stein was the manager of Hibs. And he got Hibs over for that. He got Real Madrid over for a friendly to Easter Road. It was Willie Hamilton and these guys played 1-2-1, and that was really the start of it for Jock Stein. Really, you know, that's when he was really beginning to build his reputation. Even then, Real had a really special fan, but a real special star power. And I go back to my early memories as well of Laurie Cunningham and what have you when they played against Celtic 40 years ago. Celtic won the first leg 2-0, then came here, lost 3-0 in the European Cup quarter final. And we've not really had much of an opportunity to be exposed to the kind of star power since then, so that's a really nice change.
Yeah, strangely enough, Ruffy, that was a quarter final, and I don't think Celtic got within a sniff of Europe for a long time. I think eventually you had to look towards the Martin O'Neill years before Celtic's real plight in Europe was reignited. But touching on that little bit of history, as far as the European Cup's concerned, you only actually had to beat 2 teams to get to the quarter-finals.
That's right, Dundalk.
And something like, I think it was Partizan Tirana or something like that.
That's right.
But nevertheless, Ruffy, in that stadium that day, I can remember talking to so many players, in that Celtic side saying 2-0. They lost a goal right on the stroke of half time, and then after that it was all about Real Madrid. They even had Stilica, the German international, playing and scoring for them. But it was great days. But the Celtic fans who are coming here in great numbers are longing. They just wanted to play a Real Madrid again, never mind your Barcelonas or anybody else. Yeah,
that's what happens when you're playing in Europe for a long time. As a supporter, you want to say that you've been seeing all the big sides. This one's they've missed them for a long time, so I think that's the focal point of why they're all here. They want to be the supporter who says, look, I was at that game.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk in greater detail a little later on about the possibilities of Celtic pulling off a result here, a draw, maybe even a win. Let's not all start drinking Kestrel Super Lager, as Gordon Strachan used to say. But I don't want to be dismissive of Celtic, because quite simply Ange Postecoglou will see this whole campaign, Stephen, as a huge learning curve, and he's reiterated that time and time again after yet another defeat or a draw.
It's a really strange scenario, because if you look at actually Celtic's record in the Champions League in the last 10 years or so, 9 years, it's not great. It makes for sobering reading. You look back, the last home win was against Ajax. Last one, Ajax, 2012-13 was it? 1-2-1. The last one of any description was away to Anderlecht, I think 17-18. Only 2 wins in all that time. Couple of draws against Borussia Mönchengladbach, 2 against Manchester City, Shakhtar Donetsk obviously. But actually it's not a great record. But despite all that, despite this being a fairly slightly disappointing campaign, there's still positivity. And I think that's really what Ange Postecoglou has achieved. He's managed to get some credit in the bank. He's managed to win over the supporters and take them along for the ride and make them think that he knows how to make this team better.
Well, let me pick up on that point and get both your guys' thoughts on it. You mentioned there that Ange Postecoglou has highlighted the positivity of the learning curve, etc. Well, now we switch our mind to Rangers, because they're going to take on Ajax. Final game for them. Totally disappointing campaign. What's been the difference? Is it the mindset, the attitude, or a realisation of what he has available to him that's put Giovanni van Bronckhorst very much on the back foot? Started off saying that Rangers can't compete financially on match day 1, and then finishes off ahead of this game against Ajax saying, listen, we can't even compete with Ajax. They've spent millions on players.
Yeah. For me personally, Peter, I think the Rangers group was tougher. I think it was a harder group. I think you look at Napoli, you're talking about probably the most exciting team in Europe at the minute for me. Look at Liverpool, they're having their difficulties, but it's all relative, isn't it? I mean, what's the difficulty for Liverpool compared to the difficulty for Rangers? I mean, Rangers go into this game, they've lost the entire defence, surely. Ben Davies looks like he's unfit. Yilmaz is out. They're going to have to play James Sands and Leon King as central defence. They have lost John Lundstrom to suspension, so their midfield will be kind of 30-something Stephen Davis and Scott Arfield, probably with Tillman in front. So, you know what? I think Giovanni van Bronckhorst took a lot of criticism for his comments about they can't compete. The reality is it's true. I think in terms of finances, it's very, very difficult for Celtic and Rangers to compete. But of course, if you're fans of the other clubs, Peter, you're looking and saying, well, welcome to our world.
Well, are we guilty? Well, absolutely. If you're a Motherwell and Tam Cowan highlights it time and time again, but if you are a Rangers fan, should you be cutting the manager more slack then? Because the truth hurts, as Stephen has mentioned there. The only problem I think they've got is the manner of the defeats and the fact that they're facing up to the possibility of delivering one of the worst runs in Champions League history. They don't want to be associated with that. No points and a huge goal deficit.
Yeah, I have to agree with Stephen for a wee bit. It was only 3 months ago that team were in the final of a European competition. That team were possibly one of the hardest teams to score against, and the strength of the team was the defence. They would go away to games and not concede or put in a solid performance at the back and be very, very difficult to beat. That's not now the case, and I don't think the Rangers supporters can get their head round. We're losing 4 goals, we're losing 7 goals, we're losing 3 goals. What is that all about? But basically, the strength of the team isn't there now. Yeah. Golson's out, they've sold Bassey, they've lost Aribo. You've got to give them a wee bit of slack, but in saying that, supporters don't give you slack. They don't like their team getting heavily defeated at home.
I was thinking there, Peter, is it used to be that for a manager to be successful at Celtic and Rangers, he had to get to the Champions League group stage. I think now it's the worst thing they can do. Financially, it's obviously beneficial to the club, but it's really hazardous to their job prospects. You look at Thomas Tuchel got the sack.
Yeah.
You look at Tedesco at RB Leipzig, who was tossed out for Marco Rose. 1 bad result, 2 bad results, you're in trouble in this competition. And for Celtic and Rangers to compete is really difficult, so they are putting themselves in grave peril by getting to this group stage.
Well, I think the other aspect of this, and it's twofold on that point, it doesn't help if you are behind your greatest rivals domestically.
Yeah.
That's one thing that's gone against Giovanni van Bronckhorst. And the other thing that I think has gone against him, Stephen, is the way they're playing.
Yeah.
You can't let your eyes deceive you. Sensible Rangers fans are looking and going, this football's not great to watch.
Yeah, I think Giovanni van Bronckhorst is a very difficult man to dislike in any way. I think he's a very nice guy. I think he's a very decent man. But I wrote at the weekend, it takes me back slightly to the remember when David Hay was sacked as Celtic manager, 1987, and Jack McGinn said he was almost too nice to be Celtic manager. I do wonder sometimes if there's an element of that with Giovanni van Bronckhorst. I remember another manager saying to me when he got the job, he wasn't absolutely convinced that he had the personality to be Rangers manager. Just because it needs that hard edge. Look at Walter Smith, he was a nice man, but he knew when to crack the whip.
Yeah.
He knew when to be the bad cop to the good cop. And I just wonder whether Giovanni van Bronckhorst is, it always seems very much on the level all the time, whether he's going to have to get a little bit tougher with this team just to fire a rocket up them. To go back to your original point, they look at the minute like a team playing with very little personality. Although I have to say, in fairness, against Aberdeen on Saturday, they were far better, far higher tempo, far more urgency.
Yeah, well, they need to take that into the game tonight against Ajax and deliver that urgency, that drive. The goals always help in a situation like this one against an Ajax side that clearly haven't had a great campaign either.
No.
Let's not forget, Ruffy, this is a team that beat Rangers and then had 4 successive defeats and quite a few hammerings. 17 goals they've lost in those 4 games.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm going to stick my neck out here and think Rangers will get something out of this game. I know they've still got something to play for. Stephen's already quoted the weekend result against Aberdeen. I know it was against Aberdeen. I know it was 4-1, but I thought a lot of the Rangers players were lacking in confidence. I think they'd been hit very hard, with all the stuff that's been going on round about. That win, that scoring goals will give them a wee bit of a lift. I think the support will give them a bit of lift as well. And usually with footballers, when you get a bit of battering, you stick together and you say, right, this is the night we turn it. And I've got a funny feeling they will just narrowly do something that will get the supporters back on board.
What, a draw?
A draw would be. I think a draw would be fine.
No, I know a draw would be fine, but are you going for a draw?
No, I'll stick my neck out and go 2-1.
2-1 Rangers?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just about to say to you, Ruffy, I'm not looking at you in amazement as if to dismiss your opinion. I'm looking at the odds here. It's 11-4 Rangers. 11-4. And Ajax are 17-20 to try and get the 3 points. They'll get Europa League out of this because Rangers would need to beat them 5-0 to get Europa League, so that's not going to happen. Yeah. And I must admit, apart from Aberdeen, he's also tinkered with the side because he's had the injuries, and he's also tinkered up front because he can't work out who's best to play up front. Is it Morelos that I thought would have been the best option at Anfield, or is it Čolak because he keeps scoring goals and giving him a headache to say, why are you dropping me here? I've banged in the goals.
I saw a stat at the weekend, Peter. It was said that I think 22 games, maybe 23 now. I don't think Rangers have played the same team twice. It's been chopping and changing consistently. You don't get the impression he knows his best team. The one thing I would say is that you can't pin all of this on Giovanni van Bronckhorst. I think most people would think that the recruitment team certainly needs to take some responsibility, because Ruffy touched on it earlier. They lost Calvin Bassey. They lost Joe Aribo, who for me were the two best players last season. And I don't think they've replaced them quite to the same standard, despite having a few quid from both those players. So, okay, ultimately that comes down to the manager giving it the yes, I want to sign these players. But my guess would be that those players were identified elsewhere. And they just haven't got quite the same standard as they had last season. And, you know, they just don't look like the same team to me. And I think the chopping and changing of players hasn't really helped, because Giovanni Van Bronckhorst doesn't look to me as if he knows who he can trust. And that goes back to your point about Cholak or Morelos. For me, tonight, it has to be Cholak.
Yeah, it's got to be 14 goals in 21
But
games.
they need to attack, don't they? I mean, they need to go and try and get goals. I mean, if you look at their defensive woes and their problems, there's nothing to be gained by trying to park the bus, because they don't think they're capable of it with Leon King and James Sands as central defence. They don't have the discipline or the personnel, so they may as well get in the faces of Ajax, go out there and have a right good goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Ruffy, you're going 2-1. I can't see it myself. I mean, I think there could be goals in it. I'm going to, strangely enough, I'm going to go 3-2 Ajax in a 5-goal thriller with every nerve shredded. I'd love to see Rangers get the result, but I just don't think they're playing with that confidence. I certainly don't think they have the players that the manager wants to call on that are capable of putting a dent in Ajax. And remember, it's all about levels.
Yeah.
I think Celtic and Rangers are pot 4.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. But the Europa League teams, Peter, that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah.
I don't. How do you see it going yourself?
I think Rangers can get a point. I think for the personnel reasons we've just identified, it's going to be incredibly difficult. But I'm going to say 1-1 or 2-2.
Okay, you can give us your view on that. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. We've got lots of great competitions coming up. Got to get into that museum, Ruffy. Got to get in there and get a few prizes for the Christmas run-in, because I know everyone would love a Real Madrid top, wouldn't they?
Yeah, most definitely. I'm eagerly waiting to see which one you go for.
Well, there's only one player I'm going for, Ruffy.
Well, I thought are you going to go for Benzema?
Not a chance.
Modric?
Yes.
Oh, well, there you go.
Modric's just a joy.
You better buy 2.
Well, I'll buy one for the competition, because I don't know if you remember this, Stephen, but I can remember Scotland playing against Croatia at Hampden.
Oh yeah.
And he was a youngster in the side, and he absolutely bossed the game.
Oh.
And I turned around to somebody and I said, "Oof, he would be a good buy." And the Croatian journalist said to me, "Yes, everybody in Europe is chasing him."
yeah.
No surprise.
Yeah, that's one project or project for the future I think Celtic and Rangers would like to have signed.
Yeah.
He's an absolutely sublime talent. You think back to that Euro 2020 game where he just, he decapitated Scotland. He sliced us and diced us.
Were you one of those journalists who said, "I think he's getting old and I think it could be past his best"?
Yeah. Not going to deny it.
I know. I'd love to go to the Luka Modric training school where he says, "Right, well, all we're just going to practice for the whole day is passing the ball with the outside of your boot." He's unbelievable, isn't he?
Absolutely sublime.
You can hear manager saying, "Put your foot through that." No, I'm just going to hit it with the outside of my foot.
He wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes in Scottish football. Let's be honest with you. He doesn't play the game. We play the game, and that's probably part of our problem.
Yeah, I'm looking. I mean, even the bus stops have photographs of Mont Blanc legend, and there's Zinedine Zidane. Even he get the chop from here, and he'd won a few Champions Leagues. But the cast that's played in the white is absolutely endless in world superstars. But I'm certainly one of those guys that looks at these players, Stephen, and said, it's a joy to be in the stadium to watch them and say, I've seen Benzema, I've seen Modric play.
It would be interesting, Benzema, I don't know if he'll start against Celtic. I think he's missed the last 2 games against RB Leipzig and against Gijon. They drew 1-1 at the weekend. Seems to have a muscle injury problem. And the other factor coming into this as well is the World Cup is on the horizon. So if you're carrying Benzema, you don't want to be taking any risks just now, do you?
Yeah.
So I think he might start on the bench tomorrow night. Is that good for Celtic? In theory, because it's a Ballon d'Or. But they'll bring in Rodrigo. They'll have Vinicius Jr. on the left-hand side. They'll have Valverde on the right. So they've got an incredible talent list.
Yeah, I always like the 24 hours prior to the game where a number of players always come out and say nice things about the opposition. Danny Carvajal has mentioned it. Vinicius Jr. has said he expected Celtic to get more points from the group based on what they produced over that 60 minutes. I mean, Stephen and I are slightly more cynical about it. Sometimes it can be viewed as patronising, Ruffy. But I looked at the Real Madrid players when that Champions League theme was kicking in, and you could see them all going, we've been around Europe, we've never heard anything like this, and then eventually they just clicked back into professional mode and said, right, we'll wait and pick our moment against Celtic.
Yeah, that's the way it went that night. But yeah, as a footballer, and you're standing in a venue you probably haven't been in before, you do take a wee look about, and with the lights all going at Parkhead and everything, and the fans and everything that goes with it, you have to be impressed. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, and I know that a lot of them have played in a lot of different stadiums throughout Europe, but it takes a bit of beating. But you're right, once the game starts, they just focus on winning the game, and they're professional footballers, and that's what they do.
Yeah, technically they're at an unbelievable level. The one thing I was going to ask you about, and in the shadow of this stadium being built for a colossal amount of money, Florentino Perez is still pushing the Super League.
Oh, yeah.
They're desperate for money. Barcelona are in huge debt as well. How do they compete with the imbalance? If we're talking about Celtic have to punch above their weight, how do the mighty Real Madrid compete with the imbalance that English football has created?
They can't. And that's why the European Super League is on the slates, and that's why they're pushing it, through the Court of Arbitration for Sport or whatever. I mean, they are desperate for this to happen. Not only the Spanish clubs, the German clubs, the Italian clubs, because they look up and they see English football disappearing into the horizon. And you know what, there's a dynamic changing in England as well right now, Peter, because I remember looking at a pie chart of the wealth, the accumulated total wealth in the English Premier League, and the owners of Newcastle can buy and sell the rest of them put together. So what you will see is, for Manchester City being the dominant force right now, within 2 or 3 years, Newcastle will be the force to beat. So every year or so this changes, and English football grows more and more powerful, kind of backed by petrochemical states effectively. And for Real Madrid and for Barcelona and for Juventus, the only chance they have is to draw them into their orbit and play them every single week. The problem they have is that the English teams don't need them as much as they need the English teams.
Yeah, and that is the fear. It's not just a problem, it's a real fear among owners now, and they have to try and work out how to bridge that gap. Whether Celtic and Rangers can hang on their coattails is another matter. So with that in mind, it will be Celtic punching above their weight. I have to say, again, I must be Dr. Doom, Ruffy, because I can only see Celtic going through a difficult 90 minutes and losing by more than a couple of goals. I think Real Madrid are going to win this 3-1, 4-1. I'm going to go 4-1. I'm going mental, and I apologise to every Celtic fan who's looking and thinking to themselves, well, who cares? We're here to see Real Madrid in their own stadium. They haven't played them in a while, but I think it's going to be a hefty one, because Real Madrid have to win.
Yeah, I know they have to win, and as we all know, Ange doesn't believe in a plan B, so it'll be plan A for 90 minutes, but plan A for 90 minutes could be a heavy sore one. I would like to see them, I've said this all the way through the campaign, I love the exciting football, I like the way they play. I would just like to see them being a wee bit better defensively, and hopefully that will happen tomorrow night. I hope if Real Madrid do go 2-up something, they might take their foot off the gas. Celtic get a few chances. I'm hoping it's not as you're saying 4. I'd be more than happy with a 2-0.
Yeah, I'm not. It's not a criticism of Celtic. It's an observation of the reality of the chasm between the two teams here. I say Real Madrid have to win. They're through, but they want to be in top position.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting debate, actually. I mean, I think Celtic and Rangers fans have got themselves caught up in the shape, the attitude, the philosophy of their managers and how they've approached these games. Like Rangers at times have taken a kind of conservative approach. Ange Postecoglou only plays one way. You look at Mudryk, Shakhtar Donetsk, go back to Ruffy's point there, didn't really make any provision for him. I mean, Mudryk was outstanding in the game in Poland, and then last week he was allowed to run on the pitch again. And people look at that and say, should he do more about that? I think the reality is that Celtic and Rangers simply aren't at this level just now, and it probably doesn't make much difference what they do, Peter. They're really on a hiding to nothing anyway.
Yeah. Well, with that point in mind, again, the story's now gathering pace that he's already done a deal for Yuki Kobayashi from Vissel Kobe. So that's the market that Celtic are trying to go into now. They're looking at markets where they can maybe unearth a gem that they'll be able to sell on for a fair amount of money, but that 2-year window they can get players that are unknown but can fit into a system and take them on a level. And remember, everybody's talking about it's a learning curve for Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side. It's a learning curve for Ange Postecoglou's. It's not a given that you qualify the next time.
No.
One will go straight in, but those qualifiers could provide a nightmare.
Well, the way the coefficient's going, I would imagine, based on this season, not just Celtic and Rangers, but all the Scottish teams, it's going to take a bit of a dent, which again makes it more difficult to get a team into the Champions League. So yeah, you've got that against you. It is a learning curve. I think experience is a big factor. You look at Club Bruges, who had 3 really hefty bad years in the Champions League. They qualified every time, but they were in the bottom 2 every time. And they learned, they grew, they made the money to keep hold of their best players and add to them. And this season, they're looking at they're going into knockout stages. So the question for Celtic and Rangers is whether they can get enough experience and keep their best players together to grow and develop in this competition and become a force. Can Celtic hang on to Ange Postecoglou, for example? There's talk already about Josip Juranovic. I think it'll be interesting in him in January. You've got guys like Matt O'Reilly, I think, who've got a bit of interest. It's really hard for these teams with their trading strategy to keep their best players together and make an impact in these competitions.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be a big question on some of the players, and of course, as you mentioned, it won't go away. This manager, Ange Postecoglou, linked to so many jobs. Thank you very much to everyone who's been subscribing in great numbers and watching the programme and just sucking up as much of our content as possible. If you download the PLZ Soccer app, which so many thousands of people have been doing, you can watch the programme on your phone and you can get all the latest breaking football news as well. It's uncensored. It's absolutely free to watch, and you get the banter as well, and you get to see Ruffy wearing shorts in the middle of Madrid as he just absolutely panders about here, just looking as if he's the bee's knees.
Yeah, well, you're abroad. It's not a holiday, obviously, but
a fine set of pins as well, I have to say.
Yes.
Yeah, well, the sun's coming out, so why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to getting into that stadium, albeit 12 euros. You don't get the full tour now because they're building everywhere, so it's a blow. Some of the Celtic fans have been moaning about it, rightly so. It takes a wee bit of the glamour off it, doesn't it?
That's the only time I've been in there before, actually. Celtic played Atletico Madrid, I think, in the Europa League a few years ago, and we did the tour. So I'm looking forward to going to a game, sampling the atmosphere. What's the capacity going to be tomorrow night?
I think it's about 81,000 that they're hoping to get to once it's all finished. I don't know about the reduction. I'm told that there could be something like 12,000 Celtic fans. Not all of them are going to have tickets. This is another one of those let's all head to the Playa Mayor.
I actually felt there were 12,000 my flight yesterday, I have to say. So it's I think the thing is that the day the draw was made, I think there's a mad rush to get tickets booked, isn't there? I mean, I think we all did it actually because the prices shoot up so quickly. So at that point, supporters wouldn't have had any idea of the scenario they would be coming into here. They would have been hoping that the last game would count for something. Sadly, it doesn't. But I'm sure they'll enjoy the experience.
Oh, they definitely will. What's your thoughts?
I'm with you. I think Celtic will do well to lose any less than 3 or 4 goals.
Yeah, okay. Sorry to be so pessimistic, but the one thing you do get on the programme and the joy of bringing Stephen on as part of the team here, and throughout all our live broadcasts Monday to Friday at 4 o'clock, you'll get opinion. Might not like it sometimes, but it's our view on games that unfold. If Celtic pull something off in this one, it ranks Stephen right up there with some of the best.
Oh, absolutely. It would be a very Scottish thing to pull off a monumental result when it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if Celtic were to win here tomorrow night, we would pass on, as well as taking pelters ourselves, I would pass on all the emails to Stephen that were coming in, belting and hammering him as well, Ruffy. We can't let him miss out on the abuse.
No, you've got to take part.
No stranger
obviously.
to that, to be fair to you.
No, we've
very kind offer though it is.
We've read your stuff. We know you get a lot of people who give you pelters.
Someone does.
Exactly, but to be fair, in the journalistic world, it's great having Stephen on with us, one of the best in the business in Scotland, and of course out to see these games and give you his view in the Scottish Daily Mail. Well worth the read if you get a chance. Over and above that, just before we finish, a couple of things I want to get your thoughts on. Hugh Dallas was quoted in the papers this morning saying there's progression. He says it'll get better. VAR, once they get iron out the tweaks and the things that are annoying people, it will be for the betterment of the game.
People never go. I think people make up their mind very quickly and they don't really change them. I think we saw slight progress last weekend. If you look at the first weekend with Hearts and Celtic, where you had Nick Walsh putting his whistle to his mouth very quickly for that Tony Wilson goal that was disallowed, that's the kind of thing I think referees will get better at. I think they will learn how to do it a bit more. They'll learn how to hold their wrist a wee bit, and that will make them better. But ultimately, I think it's still going to be hugely divisive, because the one thing VAR can't do is it can't make poor referees good, and it's still subject to human subjectivity. You can't take human error out of it, because it's still human beings who are running it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it doesn't help when some people might make the accusation, not only is the referee on the park not up to the standard, but the guys who are in the VAR studios are maybe making mistakes as well, which in the Hearts-Celtic game, a lot of people, and subsequent games since that, we have a situation where Tony Watt is appealing against his red card, and this is obviously after VAR had highlighted it to the referee.
Yes, an unfortunate one. I thought the VAR people who were deciding were going to be anonymous, but now the referees are getting they're getting targeted as well, because they know who they are up in the VAR room. So it's another double dunter for them. But I think basically, as we've said all along, get the big ones right, get the big decisions right, and if they get the majority of the big decisions right, I'm quite happy with that.
It's funny enough, because we went to the media open day.
Yeah.
Up at Clydesdale House in Bailiffs.
I'm amazed when we went into it. I thought, why would they tell anybody where it is?
Yeah, I thought the same actually. So it's got armed guards around it. And Willie Collins said something interesting that day, which I hadn't really thought about. He's spot on. He said it's actually going to take focus off referees and put it on the VAR and the video assistant referees. And I did actually hear that a couple of games the first 2 weekends. People saying, "Oh, who was it VAR today?" And there is a case for keeping that quiet, actually. And the other thing that worries me as well is that they've been using Category 1 referees as the VAR. And that takes them out of grounds and out of games.
Yeah.
Which in theory might impact on the standard of refereeing in the ground itself. So, difficult one to get right.
Yeah, and a wee bit to go before we actually stop moaning about it. I think we'll go through a wee lull moaning about it. The World Cup will come in, we'll have a moan there, and then January the 2nd, it's Rangers versus Celtic, and then the whole place will get into meltdown as the penalty is called in the last minute of that game. Woe betide anyone who's working on VAR that day. Just before we go, overview quickly, Stephen, on Scottish clubs, because we'll talk in greater detail later on this week about Hearts and their match against Istanbul, which I equally think is going to be a tough night for them, and I can't see them getting anything. But overall, it's been disappointing. We've been there, we want to be there, but it's been poor.
It's been very poor. I don't think you just have to talk about Celtic and Rangers, and Hearts have won a couple against the Latvian team. You would hope they would do well against them. You have to go back as well to Motherwell, who lost their manager on the back of what happened. It's been a really bruising, difficult season. It's been bad for the coefficient. For me, I think it's the chickens coming home to roost after COVID. If you look at it, there's a crisis there about finance, about where the clubs are going to be able to get through it financially. They cut back their infrastructure, they cut back their operations, and they haven't quite built it back up again. They need to get their academies back in shape. They need to start bringing through young players. That's the only way we're going to get better, because we can't go out and buy the players that Real Madrid buy. Can't even go out and buy the players that AZ Alkmaar buy.
Yeah.
So the only way they're going to get better is to get their academies up to shape, and that took a massive blow during COVID.
Yeah, and they're going to have to get into markets that maybe some of the super clubs are not bothering with at the moment, Ruffy. And on that point, as Stephen highlighted there, back at the start of the 2000s, when Chelsea had a player that they didn't want, Celtic were able to go and buy Chris Sutton. They couldn't even think about a Chelsea player who was just unhappy at the moment and sign him for Celtic or Rangers.
Yeah, I think a lot of responsibility is on the director of football. You've got to pick up a gem. You've got to have that knowledge throughout Europe or whatever and identify somebody. And if you get one, that changes the whole aspect of a team. That's a bonus in the way ahead.
Well, listen, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. The only thing missing is a Knickerbocker Glory and a Strawberry Sunday, Ruffy, and then it would have been the complete show in Spain, looking ahead to Real Madrid Celtic. Fingers crossed. It's a good night for Rangers tonight at Ibrox Stadium against Ajax. Can we get a bit of positivity this week? Only time will tell. In the Bernabeu, I think a lot of Celtic fans who are managed to get themselves tickets will be just saying, yep, fantastic stadium, I was there. Hopefully it's something positive. I have my doubts. We'll talk about Hearts a little later on. Just out of curiosity, Stephen, I don't know what type of person you are. Are you the person to go in there and buy a Modric top, or will you not buy anything out of that shop?
I think, No, I'm not. I'm not. You know what? In actual fact, it's one of my biggest regrets, actually, is that 30 years in this business, I've never kept a diary. I can't remember where I've been. Honestly, I mean, all these great trips coming to places like this, and I would have to sit there and look through Google to remember being there. So I'm terrible for that, and I'm not. I always think you keep your memories up here. But, I mean, I don't know. Have you got lots of memorabilia?
It's usually after a night out. I don't remember where I've been.
Well, that's what I didn't want to say, Ruffy, to be fair. But I
do. Well, I kept some strips. I kept important strips.
Yeah.
You know, but other ones I sold on. But
I'm like Stephen, Ruffy. I mean, I just don't. I don't keep anything. It's all a blur to me.
No, don't come to the studio, whatever you do.
Don't come to the studio. I could chronicle my whole time in journalism. You'll see it.
Right,
You'll see it all there. We can't. We need to get him to the studio. We're too busy hobnobbing everywhere.
The Ted Stryker of Scottish journalism. Let me tell you about 1999.
Yeah. By the way, we're going to film his face walking into the studio, right?
Yeah.
Stephen, we've absolutely loved having you on the programme as ever. Had you down there chatting away at Liverpool, and hopefully we're going to get a lot more opportunities, Ruffy, to get your man in and give us a wee touch of reality every now and then.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I always like battering people from the Daily Mail. Him and that other boy, what was his name, McDonald?
Yeah.
Honestly, there's a kind of it's all about levels.
Is he still going?
He's still taking a check, by the way.
We've got a younger version.
Absolutely, yeah, full head of hair.
Not any better. Wicked, to be fair.
And of course, you've tucked your shirt in, which McDonald.
I don't have any soup down it, which is the difference. Yeah.
He's been in his company too long. You've nailed it, Stephen. Anyway, hit the subscribe button. Download the app as well if you get a chance. It's uncensored content. It's a bit of banter. It's a bit of opinion as well. It's all rolled in there. And it's absolutely free on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel when you hit that subscribe button and join the football family. Thank you to Stephen McGowan. I hope he has a great time in the stadium tomorrow doing his shift. And from Ruffy and I, we will see you tomorrow on the show at 4 o'clock. And also over and above that, look out across all the social media channels, because we've got lots of great features. We'll be in the shop showing you what's happening in there in the museum, and we'll have a chat with some Celtic fans and get their thoughts on the game Real Madrid against Celtic. From everyone here on PLZ Soccer's football show, thanks for watching.